Hello, welcome to another How to Play Starcraft 2 unit guide. So this unit guide will be going through every single unit in the game. We've already done so for everything up until this point. The Phoenix video has been out for a while. So we'll be going through the strengths. Once again, we'll be going through the strengths and weaknesses, their abilities, their usage, and in this episode we're going to be going through one of the most controversial and frustrating units, the Void Ray. Now, thank you. Now, if you like this content, do like and subscribe. If not for me, for the Zergling. Shake next slide. Okay, we'll eventually go through the Zergling, but that's for another episode. Now, last week we talked about the Oracle, which had no weaknesses. So let's start off as we normally do with its development. The development lore of the Void Ray, and to do that we're going to swap out to the web browser, take a look at the history. Alright, here we go. Alright, so the Void Ray is actually a unit that has been around since Wings of Liberty, but its usage then and now is very different. Just to demonstrate this, look at its abilities. Originally it is to increase the damage of the Void Ray the longer it attacks, but now in the current Void Ray you have an ability called Prismatic Alignment. Again, notice that this is a passive ability, this is an active ability. So rather than the longer it attacks, it increases the damage, is that when you press a button it increases the damage, but only against armor. We'll get to that in a second. They were introduced at the beginning of the game. It was the successor kind of to the Corsair. We'll get to that in its in-game lore. So the thing is that the original version has been nerfed a bunch of times because it was considered too strong. There were a lot of, cheese strategies. Something to note is that its ability to attack, this ability, the Prismatic Beam, still occurs in the co-op version of the Void Ray, but not in the base game. The base game version is completely changed. But as of right now, the Void Ray in the latest patch, patch 5.2, it was made cheaper, it was made better, and it was made faster. Long story short, it was really strong in the Wings of Liberty. It was Heart of the Swarm. It got nerfed to the ground in Legacy of the Void, and now they buffed it just to make it a bit more useful, much to the irritation of Zerg players such as myself, because Void Rays are now in every game. But are they actually broken? Not really. We'll get to that in a second. So there have been many phases of Void Ray play, including the current meta that we'll be going over as during this series. So that's a little bit of its development lore over the history of StarCraft 2. Let's talk about the in-game lore. Yep, here are some of the skins. Alright, so the Void Ray is actually, it's a very interesting unit because it's actually a product of a joint engineering project, if you will, between the Nerazim and the Kalai. Okay, so bit of complicated backstory is that after the whole world of Aya was captured by the Zerg, yeah, they kind of ate the planet. The original people from Aya fled to Shakuras, which should be mentioned somewhere here. Here we go. So they fled to the Dark Templar home world of Shakuras. The Dark Templar basically let them stay. But that whole thing is a story for another video. It's actually a lot of complicated history because the Dark Templar were originally outcasts from the Kalai, and they were they were actually branded as heretics by the ruling caste of the Kalai called the Templar. But again, a lot of complicated history that I don't want to get to right now. You can go to the Wikipedia page and read everything if you so choose, or read the books, which I have. But after the fall of Aya, they decided to kind of put their differences aside and work together. So in the new age of the Daylam, or the Unified Protoss, the Void Ray itself, these things, were meant to be both a symbol of the unity as well as an attempt to create a new starship that could fight for prolonged periods of time. That could be compared to the carrier. There was even talk about it potentially replacing the carrier as the capital ship of the Protoss, although the carrier is still around both in game and in lore. Um, as for the other factions, such as the Tal'Darim or the Forged, they replaced the prismatic crystal that we'll talk about in a second with bloodshard crystals rather, which are unstable but have more destructive potential. If you play the Legacy of the Void campaign, you can pick that, or when you're playing in co-op, when you play Alarak, you could use the destroyer variants, which have more damage but less range. As for the specific engineering, okay, let's go back to the Void Ray. For the specific engineering, I'm supposed to be here. For the specific engineering, oops, wrong one. Okay, so for the specific engineering of the Void Ray, they've got something called a Prismatic Core down here, which you can see kind of from here, and it's got a synthetic crystal created specifically with the purposes of channeling its beam, which are designed to shred through armor plates. Now, it's never stated who the pilots actually are, but one thing that it is stated in the lore is that the Nerazim specifically are the ones controlling the prismatic lens. Basically, when I pressed E just now, that thing happened. Yeah, to focus the beam as its main weapon. That's why the Void Ray is most prominently featured among Nerazim factions, although, as I mentioned, and as you can see in the different skin sets, there are different variants from these. See, this is from Co-op, this is from the Purifiers, Nerazim, Tal'Darim, Ihadri, and the Golden Age one, and the respective portraits. Not pilots, portraits. Alright, so let's get back to the Void Ray. So that's a little bit on the in-game lore of the Void Ray. Let's talk about how you make one of these things. Alright. So the first thing you gotta do, of course, is you need a pylon, then you need a gateway, then you need a Cyberdex Core, then you need a Stargate. So once the Stargate is done, you can immediately start building Void Rays. Let me get this on. Oops. Yep, you can immediately start building. So to make a basic Void Ray, you need to go Pylon, Gateway, Cyberdex Core, Stargate. In other words, if this is for default hotkeys, you need to go E, G, Y, V, then S. Again, we're talking about the standard Void Ray, we're not talking about the co-op variants, although for co-op it's the same thing, except Alarak, you just call them in from the sky. Now, in terms of where you can get the upgrades for the Void Ray, alright, so you can get the upgrades for the Void Ray in 3 places. The first is there we go. Now the first is the Cyberdex Core. With all air units, you could get upgrades here. So notice that right now it does 6 damage and 10 against armored. If I buy it from here, 7 and 11. So basically +1 attack. Same for the armor. Yep, so +1 armor. You can also get upgrades from the Forge. And this applies to all Protoss units. So if you buy a Forge, and you buy +1 shields, it increases the shields of all Protoss units. So you can see that it will now take less damage per shot for both shield and armor, provided you spend the minerals and gas on them. Now, apart from this, there's one more place you can get upgrades, and that is the Fleet Beacon. Now, the Fleet Beacon upgrade is not, it's a passive upgrade, but it's a bit more complicated. If you go to the Fleet Beacon, there's something, this is a new upgrade that came out in the latest patch, although that's been 6 months ago. It's called Flux Vanes. It basically increases the speed of the Void Ray. So let me demonstrate what I mean. Okay, let's put it on patrol. This is the current speed of the Void Ray. This is the Void Ray on Flux Vanes. Yeah, you can, it's noticeably faster, and it accelerates faster once the thing kicks in. which is actually going to be useful for harassment strategies. We'll get to that in a minute. Alright, let's go back. Let's deactivate the upgrades, just so that our examples later will be consistent. We can leave, let's deactivate Flux Vanes. Alright, so let's talk about its abilities. Now the first is Prismatic Alignment. So, okay, so the definition, I realize the void rays, blah 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 blah, to gain 6 damage, reduce movement speed when active. Alright, so notice that if you fire it, it does a good amount of damage, it's cutting through the shields. But if you activate it, you notice that it's doing a lot more damage, a lot more quickly. Oh, I made a sentry. But it's a lot slower as opposed to when it was in its normal mode. It's just chewing through that building. Okay, and then it ran out of power. Or rather, it's on cooldown. Again, notice if you watch older VODs of this game, in the previous version, what players would do is that they would charge the beam against rocks, destructible rocks, and then attack the enemy. So again, that was literally so broken that it got moved to co-op, where, to quote the former lead developer, the AI is not going to post on the Belnet forums. Now, its other ability, as mentioned, is the prismatic, the Flux Vanes. Again, this is an upgrade that is more for, okay, it's used in Void Ray harassment cheese, where you amass 7 or 8 Void Rays, you just fly around the map. Or it's used in late game, where you already have 4 bases and a ton of money, and you can basically, you know, fly around and start just zapping things at will. One or the other. Makes the Void Ray go vroom. Vroom. Alright. Alright, so let's get to the meat of this video, which is the strengths and weaknesses of the Void Ray. Ah, yes. So as mentioned, it's got 2 abilities, Prismatic Alignment and Flux Vanes. Again, we've just gone through these, so let's move on to the strengths and the weaknesses. Alright, so let's talk about the first strength, which is its ease of use. What do I mean by this? Well, the thing good about the Void Ray is that they require relatively low micro, and they can attack both ground and air. So let's say you're going up against a Marauder Medevac army, you just attack, you just A move, you can attack the Medevacs, cut them down, activate Prismatic Alignment, and just burn through everything. You want to micro them and take down units, you can, but they're just easy to use. This is in part, I strongly believe, where the Protoss A move beam comes from. I think Flux Vanes is still on. No, it's not. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so it's just easy to use. You just amass Void Rays and you attack. And if the player doesn't have the right counter or the right unit compositions, they just die. No micro required. They kill everything on the ground, eventually. Then they kill everything in the air, eventually. And this is also useful in, let's say, the situations where the enemy decides, okay, let's go for a drop. Oh, I did see the Void Rays. Activate Prismatic Alignment. Oh no. Alright, so that's its first. That's the first major strength. Let's jump to the next. Now the next is that it's anti-armor abilities. Now what do I mean by this? And this is something very, very important to know, where it says 6 and more, and basically +4 against armor. What this means is that it does bonus damage against things that are armored. So every unit in the game has a tag. Let's say the Immortal, it's armored mechanical. So the Void Ray will do 10 damage per shot, or rather per tick, against armored, as it will against something like a drone, which is only light and biological. Let's take a look at the Terran build of the SCV. Light, biological, mechanical, not armored. Light, mechanical, not armored. The Roach, armored, biological. The Marauder, armored, biological. The other thing to note is that all buildings in the game, whether it be a hatchery, a pylon, or an eBay, are all armored units. The only exception to this is the creep tuber, which is... oh, wrong one. Ooh. The creep tuber is a light biological structure, so yeah. So what I mean by this, let's say I attack the marauder, it dies pretty fast, but it would actually have taken longer to take out the creep tuber. Basically it does bonus damage to all these things, which means that the void ray is strongest against armored units, and especially when it comes to sniping buildings. 3 void rays in 10 seconds flat can knock out an entire hatchery if there are no queens, no anti-air, and then just get out of here. Yep, gone. Same for the engineering bay. See how fast this thing is falling? Even without the bootlings. And even without prismatic alignment. It just murders them. So in the actual game, you can have like a bunch of void rays just flying around, 4, not even 5, and just sniping off key units, key structures, and getting out before and the anti-air like comes back in. Of course, you don't want to make mistakes like that. Alright, so that's its second strength. Let's talk about its last, which is air mobility. What do I mean by this? Well, let's say you have a... let's get rid of these void rays. This tends to happen sometimes. Wait. Ah, here we go. Alright, so let's say you have a group of mining SCVs, you have an enemy base here, and they've got a bunch of marines guarding the ramp. If I just take in the void rays, I could just fly in, open fire, attack. No, SCVs get back to work. Oh no, the marines, they come in, they try and take down the void rays, they fire, and we're out of here. The marines can't chase over this wall, and by the time they actually get down here to go after the void rays are long gone. You can also do things like abuse high ground and fight the marines. Zip, the marines can't go after them, there's a building in the way. But if you fly, you don't care about buildings. The marines are still down here, they're looking for the void rays, but the void rays have already flown back up here. The marines are like, oh no! And they come back up, and by the time they come back up, every single SCV has been reduced to shreds. And by the time the marines get here, the void rays just fly away. Air mobility. Alright, so especially with the first point, you might think that, oh man, these void rays are OP. If I get enough void rays, I can destroy anything. Marines even, but not so fast. Let's talk about their weaknesses and why they're not overpowered. Okay, this happens from time to time. Alright. Okay, so let's take this scenario. Let's say we have 5 void rays and 40 Zerglings. Less minerals but gas, and the job of the Zerglings is to protect this pylon. This is actually a realistic scenario in ZVP where you have where one player goes for void rays and the other sees the void rays and decides to say, you know what, let me just go for mass Zergling. The Zergling is a light biological unit. Armor is sticking out a bit. It's a light biological unit, so it doesn't do bonus damage. Let's start and let's fight. The Zergling can't shoot up, but the pylon's screwed. Watch. Plenty of Zerglings to go. Let's try that again. They can't kill it fast enough. So one strategy against void rays is like, I don't care, I just flood you with Zerglings. Again, these are Zerglings. They don't even have the wings, they don't even have speed yet, and that pylon just went down. Another thing you can do is that Okay, another weakness of the Void Ray is that, and this comes back to the issue about non-armored, is that if you're going up against a unit that has anti-air, that the Void Rays cannot kill fast enough. Like the Marine as we saw earlier. Oh wait, let me clear the board and reset it. The load function does weird things sometimes. Oops, no, not SCVs. -5. Minus another 5. One more. Alright, let's see how this goes. Zero, zero, no upgrades on each side. You get the idea. The Marine, and by the way, the Marines only cost minerals. The Void Rays cost a lot of gas. See? Realistically, I should have closer to this number of Marines. Hell. Yeah, let's call it 40 Marines because the gas count is just imbalanced. This is what this would look like more realistically. So against non-armored targets like the Marine, the Void Rays are in quite a bit of trouble. Alright, let's clear the board. Alright, so that's its first weakness. Now, the other weakness it has is that the Void Rays, by its very nature, they clump up. There's also a case to be made against that even armor units can take out the Void Ray, but we'll get back to that in matchup specific comments. Oh dear. Here we go. Alright, so what I mean by this, well, the thing about Void Rays and air units in general, but Void Rays mutas, is that they're very vulnerable when they move because all of the units are trying to stack on one point. Okay, if you can see this. That means if the Viper does something like, oh, I don't know, parasitic bomb. Oh no, they try to fly away, all of them are taking damage to that shot. Oh, that hurt, okay. Let's say I try and fire something else. Get after him! Oh no, they've all been hit. And now they're all covered in Dorito dust. Now what this is and what this unit is, the Raven, we'll get back to that in a future video. Or worse still, let's say they clump up. Okay, they say they see this High Templar. Oh, I need to activate the storm ability. Oh, they see a High Templar. Oh, it's a lone High Templar, let's go kill him. I still didn't activate storm. Oh, I need to activate it for blue, my bad. Yep, now we've got storm. Let's say the Void Rays. Oh, let's kill the High Templar. Yep, oh, a parasitic bomb. Oh no! And then they take a lot of damage on the way out. Now the real problem you get with Void Rays is against Widow Mines. Let's say you have your Void Rays, they're already wounded from the fight. They see this Raven here and they decide, okay, let's go after him. They clump up. Air units, by their nature, clump up and it's vulnerable against things like these. What all these units are, we'll get to them in a future video. The High Templar we've already covered. Link will be down in the description if I remember to put it there. Alright, so let's go to its last weakness. It's expensive. Every single Void Ray here, look, here's the thing, right? The Void Ray is a flying tank, but tanks by their very nature are expensive. It's 200 minerals, 150 gas. If you're spending this much gas on Void Rays, you're not buying, let's say, you're not buying Immortals, you're not buying Archons, you're not buying Dark Templar, you're not buying Disruptors, you're not buying a lot of other options. It's also very difficult then to tech to other units like carriers, tempers, motherships when you're going on a heavy Void Ray composition. And okay, here's a true story. Let me tell you what happened. Okay, there was a game I was watching. These were against two Silver League players. Let me set up this realistically. Alright, so one player was going Void Rays. The other player, another Protoss, saw the Stargate. Let me make something a bit more realistic here. Instant build off. Okay, a Void Ray takes a while to build. The other player just saw this, got 3 Zealots, and attacked the pylon. This actually happened. I don't have the replay, but I kid you not, this happened. This Silver League game, this is what happened. And the player who went for the 3 Zealots just won the game, or maybe it was 2 Zealots. Look, but even if you had like only 2 Zealots attacking, and even if you make the Void Ray, and you go after the pylon, it just knocks it out. That's all it took. Again, the player who made the Void Ray didn't have anything else. It didn't have stalkers, didn't have cannons. This happened. In fact, let me give you the benefit of the doubt since I've lost my mind on this example. Let's say a Void Ray was done and another Void Ray was in production. I think they could get the pylon. Yeah, the 3 Zealots will still get the pylon. More Zealots will be rallying in from this side. And the guy just loses the game, even though he has the Void Ray. This actually happened. So those are its weaknesses. Now let's go to matchup specific comments where I have many. Okay, matchup specific comments. Alright. First of all, a disclaimer. I asked around on the Platinum Heroes Discord server, and the first thing they mentioned when I asked them about the Void Ray was about a cheese. There is a very specific cheese that you could use in all 3 matchups. I will show you a little bit of that. Okay, so here's screenshots of a replay between 2 of my friends. If you look at the minimap here, this is the Terran base right up to the north. And you can see what the Protoss player is doing is that he's setting up a proxy location just out of vision. And he's going to be making Void Rays and leapfrogging his way to victory. So this is a little bit later. Because he's got these shield batteries here healing up the Void Rays, any attack on the Void Rays, he could just pull back and heal. See? Yeah, so there's a fight. The wounded Void Rays are being pulled back. They've got plenty of batteries. The Marines are slowly dying, taking real damage, whereas shield damage against the Void Ray is just nullified. Are there counters to this? Yes. Could you have built a tank or a cyclone or missile turrets or scouted this? Yes. But in this specific situation, the Terran screwed and the Terran proceeded to lose this game bad. Again, this was a practice game specifically to showcase the Void Ray cheese. It's against Terran, but this can be used in all 3 matchups. This could be a Protoss with Stalkers, Void Rays doing the same thing. Well, still, this could be a Zerg with Queens and Spore Callers, exactly the same thing. Every single map, give or take, where there's a position that you can set up a proxy location, this is possible. Doesn't matter what skill level you are, you can do this. And just look at the number of shield batteries down here. You need a lot of firepower to drain those batteries, and shield batteries, they gain value over time. Again, that is the disclaimer. This is part of the card meta. It's not super common, but it does happen. It's worth talking about. But that's not what my core focus of this section is going to be, because I want to focus on matchup specific comments in more macro games. So with the cheese out of the way, let's go back to the macro aspect of the game. Oops. Alright, so let's talk about the macro aspect. Alright, so in all matchups, they are good generally as a late game unit, because if the enemy is amassing an air army, this is one way to counter it. In fact, let's go into the specific matchup comments. Alright, so let's talk about PV Okay, so Protoss against Terran is the place you see the least void rays. The reason is that, as you saw in the Marine example, Marines just mow this down. The vast majority of the Terran arsenal is anti-air. Everybody shoots, and majority of them shoot up. Now this is where I wanted to talk about even against mech, where the majority of units are armored, there are more than enough options to keep the void rays away. For example, the Cyclones, who are armored mechanical, let's say the void rays are here, the Cyclones who are armored mechanical, with good micro, they could easily take down the, they could put up a fight against the void rays. Is it an even trade? Not really. If there was more space, they would be able to run away, but they can take them down, and again, the void rays kind of cost more, even though they were armored. Okay, Widow Mines, my gosh, Widow Mines just wreck void rays if they hit. Of course, that being said, the void rays could just, you know, fly around the Widow Mines if you knew where they were. If you didn't, this happens. Again, the void rays are light mechanical, so that helps as well. Even against the super heavy Thor, again, armored mechanical, but even against Thors with their high impact payload, it's not that clear cut. Because Thors have a lot of HP and they do a lot of damage. And you might be saying, wait, but what about Prismatic Alignment? Alright. Oops. Oh boy, nope, not a fair example. High impact payload, attack, activate Prismatic Alignment. See, that's the thing, the Thor's range is 7, the Void Ray's range is 6. The Thor will be able to outrange the Void Ray, and in this scenario it's going to be really close. Really close. Alright, with Prismatic Alignment, a slight victory. But with proper micro and the Thors, with other things like missile turrets and the aforementioned Widow Mines, it's going to be tough. So, and again, this is not even counting Terran has its own air force that could go toe to toe with the Void Ray. Win with Prismatic Alignment? Not really, but the more realistic option is these guys turn on Prismatic Alignment, the Vikings just leave. And the Viking technically will outrange the Void Ray, so with good micro, you could eventually pick them off, although it's hard. And of course, that's not also counting the fact that Terran has battle cruisers with Yamato that they could call in. So against Terran, it's used the least. That being said, as mentioned, as seen earlier with they are very good drop denial. Yeah, so this just stops medevacs to go into your main. That's if you chose to go for Void Rays. Most of the time in the current meta, it's Stargate into Oracle, then maybe 1 or 2 Void Rays, but against Terra, not really. Okay, so let's talk about Protoss versus Protoss. Clear the board. Okay, so Void Rays are a safe option because if the enemy goes, let's say 5 Stalkers, you get 1 Void Ray. The enemy goes 5 Stalkers against 1 Immortal. This is what the outcome is going to be. The Immortal will wreck everything on the ground, but if the Void Ray successfully targets, fires, and is able to knock out all the Stalkers, the Immortal will eventually die. So it's a safe opening. The Immortal has to run away and probably die in the process. Now, against the Stalker, it's actually a bit of a double-edged sword because it does bonus damage against armor, and the Stalker is armored. But the Stalker also does damage against armor, so it's anti-armor against anti-armor. It then depends on things like micro, whether you have Blink, who has more Stalkers, upgrades that decides who wins this. However, if the enemy chose to go for something else completely different, let's say Mass Adepts, Yeah, they could just shade past. They could just shade past your army and then kill your middle line. In fact, will they be able to beat the Stalkers? Because this one does damage against light, but it's also light. Yeah, like the adepts are actually killing the Stalkers, so it depends on your unit composition. Lastly, yeah, they can't shoot up, so downside. Lastly, the Archon does do splash damage against air, so if you clump up your Void Rays against a bunch of Archons, you're gonna have a bad time. That happened quite quickly, but if you noticed, because the Void Rays were clumping up, some of the shots were doing additional damage. That's not so obvious now. Let me clump them up. Oh, there we go. So PvP. But again, very good against immortals and good against things like the cannon and the shield battery. Alright, let's talk about PvZ. PvZ. So this is where you see Void Rays used the most by far, for the simple reason is that there are overlords. So what's very common in current meta is that you would go for a Stargate opening. Oh right, I switched off the instant build. Come back, come back! Stupid probe. Yeah, you'd get this, you'd get like one Oracle and then you get a Void Ray. The reason the Void Ray is always good in this scenario is that you'll be able to go after enemy overlords. The other reason is that the Zerg have half of their units are melee, half of their units are ranged, and the only early game option they have against the Void Ray is the Queen. So even with something like Reap Spread, I need to build a hatchery first, make this a bit more realistic. Let's say you have a Queen looking after a hatchery, even if you have just one Void Ray. Okay, so the Queen is biological, so you come in here, you do a bunch of damage, you can get out before the Queen can chase you, and you've taken no hull damage. The shields will, with all Protoss units, will eventually regenerate. See? Then you can go in for another dive. It regenerates faster than the Zerg, and you can amass Void Rays faster than that. Likewise, if there was a single Overlord, let's say that was sent out, that's a drone. You had an Overlord that was sent out to scout, and let's say the Queen is not in position. You fly over, you activate the beam, the Queen comes in to try and save it. A bit of micro, and then you can leave. That being said, so that's a popular option. It gives you a lot of map control. That being said, if the Zerg was really frustrated, they just, as you saw in the example, you know, amass a bunch of lings and attack, and this is what's going to happen. The Zerg realistically has other options like Hydras, Corruptors that can deal with the Void Ray in its own way. But again, but the trade-off of course is that it's very hard to use the Void Ray to scout because they're just not as fast as the Phoenix or the Oracle, so it's a trade-off. Alright, so in conclusion, the Void Ray is a powerful and very versatile unit. And its shields can be strong, so beware, do go and scout. But here's the thing, over-reliance on this unit will only get you so far up the ladder, and eventually you'll hit a player that knows how to deal with Void Rays, and if you don't know how to use the other units, High Templars, or you don't have other things in play, you're gonna lose. So if you're going up against Void Rays, do remember everything I've said in this video regarding its weaknesses, those can be used to your advantage to deal with the void race. So with that, if you like this guide, do like and subscribe. I upload whenever I can, mostly Starcraft 2 content. If you have any feedback, write down in the comments. So, and Tower Dude, see you next time. If do like and subscribe, if not for me, for the Zergling. Nem 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 nem